Hey, y'all, just want to take this time to let you know that this podcast is brought to you through the use of Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor before, it is the easiest way to make a podcast. For one, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or from your computer. You can't ask for any better ease of access than that. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. There's nothing extra added to this. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. Again, this has been the easiest thing that I've used. I've used other podcast apps before, but once I switched over to Anchor, everything has been easy, free, and again, they will distribute your podcast to any place that you normally listen to your podcast to before. So again, download the Anchor app. It's for free. You can either download it directly from the Google Play Store, the Apple Store, or you can go to anchor.fm to get started and create your own podcast. Again, just want to send a thank you out to Anchor, and thank you for listening. What's going on, y'all? This is Dorian back again with another episode of the Convos in the Park podcast. For our first-time listeners, I want to thank you for joining us. And if you like the content, I ask that you please share via social media. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Shout out to everyone that has been listeners since the first episode as well. This podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, or anywhere else you listen to your favorite podcast. We also post episodes on YouTube. You can search for us by searching for Convos in the Park. We are working to reach to 100 subscribers, so if you like what you hear, please head over to our YouTube page and subscribe as well. As hit that notification bell so when we return with more video content, you'll be one of the first ones to know when it releases. We have other video content for you to enjoy there as well. So please don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. With that being said, let's get into this episode. I wanted to take a break from all the craziness that is going on in the world and talk about something that is very important to me and an art form that has helped to shape me into the man that I've become. That art form is hip hop. I was introduced to hip hop by my uncle around 9 or 10 years old. He would go around and play Run DMC, Eric B. and Rakim. Just as a kid, I would just, vibe out to the actual beats, and I was just real interested in the way that the DJs would cut and scratch the samples, and that was something that kind of drew me into hip hop. The first cassette I ever bought was Black Moon's Into the Stage. For anyone that grew up in the 80s and early 90s, one of the biggest songs that Black Moon had was the I Got You Open remix, and that instrumental was just so smooth, and the way that Buckshot was flowing over that was just a perfect vibe with the beats. Also around that time, I was listening to Pete Rock, CL Smooth. Of course, cannot talk about Pete Rock, CL Smooth without talking about They Reminisce Over You. One of my favorite joints to this day, KRS-One, The Teacher, Heavy D, Rest in Peace, Wu-Tang Clan, Daz Effects, Redman, EPMD, Big, Nas, Smith & Wesson, Mike Geronimo, Public Enemy, Tribe Called Quest, De La. Man, that list can go on and on and on. But, I mean, one of the biggest things around that was Hot 90s, of course, as a kid, and not having any money to get any cassettes or anything else like that. So, of course, I would get most of my hip-hop fixes from the radio. And New York, our main areas was Hot 97, especially in the early, in the 80s and early 90s. We had Hot 97, we had Kiss FM, we had WBLX, to help me create my so-called playlist, as you would say. Especially if you were growing up then, of course, I don't think there was any kid that at least took a cassette tape and tried to record, their favorite songs off the radio. And even if you didn't have any blanks, you would find, I know for me, myself, I would take some of my parents' older cassettes that they weren't using anymore or playing. I would take some paper and put it and stuff it into the top of the cassette and then, try and record so that way I can have something to listen to when, especially when I was going to school, riding the bus or riding in the car over to, the junior high school or even high school growing up. Now, I will admit, as a kid, of course, with most kids, you're not really into the lyrics. You're more so just listening to the beats and sitting back and thinking on that, even as an adult and someone that is, that loves the hip hop culture. One of my biggest things about getting on especially with my daughters, listening to hip hop or listening to rap, some of the songs that they would listen to, I would question, why they're listening to it. And of course, the main thing they would say, oh, well, the beats are cool, and then sitting back and I'm like, well, they're not even saying anything. But now looking back at it, again, I kind of get on the younger generation for just vibing out with certain songs and not really listening to the lyrics when I was a person that kind of fell into that same I won't say trap, but same method. But as I got older, I definitely took more interest into the wordplay and what the artist was saying, especially now. But even back then, one of the biggest outlets that I had was in the underground scene, and I cannot talk about the New York underground scene without bringing up Stretch and Bobbito. Like I said, if you grew up in the '90s and you grew up in New York, the best thing you would talk about, especially when I was in high school, you would definitely get back to school once the Stretch and Bobbito show played that week, and talk about what songs you heard, what raw tracks you heard from some new underground artists, or what artists came up there to freestyle. And again, I cannot talk about Stretch and Bobbito without talking about the infamous Big L and Jay-Z freestyle that they put on there. And I mean, that's just one for the record books there. I mean, the way that Big L was just rhyming and putting his words together, and the way Jay was just using that double time flow, early in his career, was just amazing. And that's one of the things about the hip hop culture. You have all these moments that you can talk about and discuss, and I mean, it lives on forever. Not just from the East Coast. With my parents being from Mobile, from my mother's side of the family being from Mobile, Alabama. I was introduced to a lot of Southern rap and even some stuff from the West Coast, like NWA, Eazy-E, Dr. Dre, Ice Cube, Ice-T, Too Short, and even from down south, you had the Ghetto Boys, you had Outkast, you had Goody Mob, you even had Uncle Luke. That's being able to visit my family in Alabama, kind of opened up my ears, I should say, more so to all the different forms of hip hop. And it wasn't just something that at first I thought just came strictly from the East Coast, but kind of proves that hip hop itself is a universal language, and it's something that anyone can attract itself to, and it's like I said, it's something that has formed myself as the kind of man that I am today, just off of some of the stuff that they were saying. Of course, I got a lot of my messages from Public Enemy, talking about the rights of the black man, and the stuff that we were dealing with, and even NWA, with Fuck the Police and Straight Outta Compton, talking about the stuff they were dealing with as far as police brutality and stuff like that. We had on the East Coast, we had the Stop the Violence movement, that KRS was a big part of in that, and even the stuff that KRS-One would talk about, it was just so powerful. And transforming someone with young ears into these kind of topics that kind of help develop and keep your eyes open as far as racial matters, or dealing with poverty, and of course we get on a lot of these rappers now for glorifying drugs, but more so I think now it's more so drug use, when back in the 90s they talked about selling drugs because it was the only thing that they could do to get money at the time, if they couldn't get a good 9 to 5 or something to that effect. So and looking back at it, it's amazing how hip hop has not only shaped the culture of the United States, but it's had an effect on the entire world. I mean, if you really think about it, we took something where, from the beginning, we was cutting and scratching over disco beats and stuff like that. And even into the 90s, taking samples from jazz and using those classic break beats, to make the music that we idolize now. And hip hop has brought a lot of jobs to people, and it's also made a lot of record companies rich when they, especially in the beginning era of hip hop where, you know, they thought it was a fad, they thought it was just something that was going to just fly by. And but I mean, if you really think about it, hip hop from its inception has stayed the test of time. And again, like I said, it's made a lot of people money. It's made a lot of record companies money. But the biggest thing that we need to deal with as far as hip hop is ownership. But that's another topic for another conversation. But to get back into my realm of hip hop, like I said, I'm more so of the conscious type. I love hip hop that has a statement or something to say. When it comes to that, my early beginnings of when I really started loving the conscious era of hip hop, like I said, it comes with Stretch and Bob, and really for me, it really came around the time when Most of Kweli came out with Black Star. You know, just the stuff that they were talking about, especially songs like Brown Skin Lady and Redefinition, and even thinking about you know, some songs like Twice in a Lifetime, and I cannot forget to talk about Knowledge Yourself. You know, that song that, you know, when Kweli was spitting his rhymes over that, you know, just the topics that he was talking about was just amazing. And then, you know, even going more into that, you know, you right after Black Star came out, you had Pharoah Monch, who came out with Internal Affairs, and the story that he was kicking in Queens, you know, about a kid, you know, that was just growing up in Queens and, you know, finding himself in these, you know, in these bad predicaments. You know, I mean, it's just telling of, again, I mean, it's almost in the same effect of, like, you know, what NWA was talking about, you know, in the early days. And again, it's just that we have so many, you know, topics and conversations to have, and just to be able to put it over words is just, you know, amazing. And again, you know, just the way that we flip, you know, words and syllables and metaphors, you know, to get our point across, you know, it can be poetic if you really, you know, dig deep into the hip hop culture. You know, one of the best that's to ever do it, in my opinion, in the underground is MF Doom. I mean, from, you know, when he was out with KMD, and then, you know, after Sub Rock, you know, died, rest in peace, you know, and then he became, you know, MF Doom. Just the way that he was rhyming, and just the way that, you know, it seemed like at times he was off beat, but he actually stayed on beat, and his cadence was just amazing. You know, to this day, Mad Villainy is still one of my favorite hip hop albums to this day. That, along with Little Brother's The Listening, and actually Little Brother's whole run, from The Listening all the way up until The Minstrel Show, and even with Get Back, you know, it's just amazing. Like I said, Little Brother was one of those groups that just kind of stuck with me, because again, they were one of those groups that kind of talked about just everyday stuff. I mean, you know, I think it was, I forgot what publication said it, but, you know, they were the blue collar rappers, honestly. You know, they were, you know, three brothers from North Carolina, Virginia area, and, you know, they were going to school, and, you know, they had a love for hip hop just as anyone else. And, you know, they were influenced by Kane and Cool G Rap, and you had Knife Wonder that was influenced by, you know, Pete Rock and Marley Marl and DJ Premier. You know, and it's just, you know, like I said, hip hop is just one of those. It's just an amazing art form, and just to think that it's influenced so many people just throughout the world, you know, it's just something amazing. And even nowadays, you know, you have some of those people that kind of influence. You have Little Brother that influence people like Drake, like Kendrick, like Wale, and, you know, and even then you still have great lyricists to this day, like Royce the 5'9", who's been putting out great content, you know, from the beginning, and all he's done is just evolve and grow and become such a powerful voice in hip hop. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, don't want to give the respect to people like Joe Budden, but I mean, if you really listen to his catalog, like, honestly, from his debut album all the way, you know, to his Move Music series, I mean, just the stuff that he was talking about, I mean, he was one of the few that, you know, really got into, you know, his emotions and the way that he was feeling. And, you know, some people, you know, call him emo rap, or he was a one-hit wonder, but, if you just look at Pump It Up or Fire, yeah, you're gonna think he's a one hit wonder. But again, with some artists, you just can't go off of those one hits. You actually got to dig into that catalog, and you will be amazed sometimes with what you will find. Like I said, Mood Music 2 was one of my best, I want to say, favorite mixtapes of all time, and I can be going on the ledge for saying that. But yeah, I mean, between that and the Bar Exam series by Royce, those, I mean, you couldn't get any better as far as lyricism and rap gymnastics when it comes to wordplay and such, as far as MCs go. But if I had to go ahead right now and give my top 5 dead or alive list, definitely number 1 would be Rakim. I mean, just the way that he rhymed, and just the way that he set the precedence for other rappers to be influenced by. I mean, you just cannot stop by not giving that man, the respect and all the credit he is due. After that, I would say Jay, just from the growth that he's had from, in my life, from the song that he made In My Lifetime up until, even the early stuff that he did with Jazz O. But, just to see his growth and, where he took hip hop after that point, is just, it's one for the record books. You cannot deny what Jay-Z has done for the hip hop culture. Even if you aren't a big fan of Jay-Z himself, but you cannot knock what he has done for the hip hop culture. And we still need to get more money back to the Cold Crush. Jay, let's see, Rakim, Jay, Big, Nas, and for number 5, it's a tie, honestly, between KRS-One and LL Cool J. But if I had to get into the I won't say the newer school, but MCs that I've looked to and enjoyed, since the 2000s, I would say Sky Zoo is still one of my favorite MCs out of Brooklyn. From his joint that he did with Knife Wonder, Cloud 9, A 3-Day High, where he pretty much came up, with the whole album in 3 days. It's just something amazing. And, I, again, just watching his growth from those days to, when he released his solo, album, and going even further, to, I want to say, the joint he did with Dumbo Station, The Bluest Note is still, I still play almost every song at least once a day. Wale, Slum Village, Lil Brother, Kendrick, Drake, Joey Badass. These are some of the artists that I listen to today, and again, they prove themselves, on the mic. They're not just coming up with something to say and just putting words together. All the words that they put into a song have meaning, and it's not just something for the club. Now, if anyone has watched any of my previous content on YouTube, my first episode for Convos in the Park, I was talking about hip hop and its future. And, around that time when I made that, mumble rap was really starting to come into play. And, trap rap was still prominent. And I did send some slack towards some of those artists in that era. But, again, as a person that's grown up and watched hip hop grow up, all these areas of hip hop are needed. Just as much as we need Public Enemy, we need someone like a Biz Markie, to bring fun. Just like we need, just like we had Soulja Boy and Lil Jon, back in the early 2000s, that had the clubs, jumping with all their songs. So. I've come to realize that, every aspect of hip hop is needed. Some of it I just have to say, just may not be for me, and I used to downplay it a lot, but, I cannot downplay it and not, take into effect of, where they came from, because as much as I say that I may not like some of this stuff, I can definitely say that, there were songs that I may have played that my parents have heard and was like, what is this nonsense? And, you just got to think about it. As you get older, your taste in music changes. So, I cannot knock the younger generation for what they're doing, and even some of the younger generation is making big strides. Like I want to say, Lil Baby. Like I used to joke with my wife at the time about her listening to Lil Baby and stuff like that. But I have to give respect to him when he came out with Bigger Than Black and White. Because that song, it actually hit the spot and hit the mark as far as what was going on, especially like when George, with the passing of George Floyd and all the stuff that was going on. So I have to give the respect to the brother for that. But I can ramble on and on about hip hop, but I would like to know in the comments, whether it be on YouTube or Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, what was your favorite hip hop albums growing up? Who are your top 5 MCs, dead or alive? Or, what are the, what albums or what songs, kind of help transform you into the person that you are now? I would definitely like to hear all that feedback. And again, we have to salute the hip hop culture, because if it wasn't for the hip hop culture, a lot of people probably wouldn't be as successful as they are now. We got, a lot of moguls and a lot of idols that we can look up to as far as everything else. And I cannot end this episode without saying salute to Master P, without saying salute to Diddy, without saying salute to Jay and Uncle Luke and Rap-A-Lot, Eazy-E with Ruthless, Dr. Dre, with his stuff with Aftermath and Beats by Dre. Salute to the entire hip hop culture. Again, this is Dorian signing off for Convos in the Park. And until next time, are you in that convo yet? Why not?